Alright, today we're going to change the spark plugs on a 2009 Toyota Corolla. It's a 2ZR-FE 1.8 inline 4-cylinder Toyota engine. It's a dual VVTi, as you can see, and we're going to change the spark plugs on this engine. So first let's go and check what we need for our spark plug change. We will need the torque wrench if you want to torque the spark plugs to spec. Otherwise, you can just torque them until they're snug, and there are some other methods that people describe on the internet. You can check them, but I would prefer just to use a torque wrench. Then you'll need a set of sockets. Then you might need a long bar like this, a breaker bar. If your spark plugs are stuck, then you might need this. I hope I won't. Then we have some other stuff here. Of course, our spark plugs. I bought these on Amazon, and they are not exactly the ones that are recommended in the manual. But we'll talk about that later. We'll need some dielectric grease. You'll need to check your gap on your spark plugs. So you need this kind of gauge or some other kind of gauge you can find. You'll need a socket for your spark plugs and some other tools. And I also like to use compressed air to blow all the dirt that might be there around the spark plug. So when we put the new spark plug, we don't bring that dirt into the cylinder or on the threads. Let's check what kind of spark plugs we need. And for that, just open your owner's manual for Toyota Corolla and check what kind of spark plugs you need. It says 1.8 liter 4-cylinder engine, 2ZR-FE. You need Denso with this number, and for the other engine you need Denso with this number or NGK. And of course there are a lot of aftermarket spark plugs, and I bought aftermarket spark plugs. So you can try using the recommended by Toyota, or you can go with the aftermarket. It shouldn't really be a problem as long as the spark plugs are good quality. Another thing you need to check in the manual is the gap. We need to make sure that our gap is like this. And it also says use only iridium tipped spark plugs and do not adjust spark plug gap. But I think this is a bit misleading, because sometimes from the shipping you might get slightly different gap because it was damaged maybe, or it got hit during shipping. So you will need to adjust the spark plug gap sometimes. Or at least it's a good idea to check them, and if the gap is not correct, maybe bring them back to the shop where you got them. As I said already, I bought aftermarket spark plugs, and I'm gonna check the gap in the spark plugs using this coin style gap gauge. So we know we need 1.1 millimeter in our spark plugs, and these are the Autolite Iridium XP spark plugs. So we're gonna check that it's 1.1 millimeter, preferably on all of your spark plugs. So it was shipped like this. It was just in a box. Sometimes they would put like a plastic or a carton cylinder here, so this part is not damaged during shipping. But these ones came like this, and now you understand why I say that they can be hit during transportation. For example, if this box would fall down like this, it would hit the tip here and it will bend it and change the gap. So it's a good idea to check the gap when you open them, especially if you bought them like from Amazon, where they would ship them. Somebody will bring them to your house, just throw the package. Or so we just take the gauge. We have the spark plug, the gauge, And I'm gonna be using metric. So on this side, we have metric. We need 1.1 millimeter, and that's here, 1.1 millimeter. So how you do it, you have to be very careful not to damage the contacts on the spark plug. You can see here, the spark plug has a very fine tip, and it's iridium coated, so you don't want to damage that. So how you would do it, you just start with the very smallest, on the thinnest part, and you would slide it gently to the thicker part, and when it kind of stops, you know your gap size, and we get exactly 1.1 millimeter. That's where it stopped. This is another spark plug that I took, and let's check the thickness here. And you can see that it stops at 1.15, not 1.1. So this one has slightly bigger gap. So they don't all come exactly the same, probably from the factory or probably from shipping. So what you can do is hit it on something solid, just a little bit, tap it, to bend this electrode inwards a little bit, and then check the gap again. So I'll need to hit it on something more solid to bend this electrode. I'm gonna do that and remeasure the gap. So now I tapped it slightly. It is easier to decrease the gap than increase the gap, because then you just have to decrease it, just tap on something solid slightly and check again. So I did that, and what we have, exactly 1.1 now. So let's check the other plugs. Another spark plug. I took another spark plug. I'm checking it, and I get like almost 1 millimeter. I need 1.1. So this one is off. It has the gap that is too small. So this is more difficult, because in the good old days, when you had your regular spark plugs, you could do whatever you want. You could bend the electrodes, maybe even file them if they were dirty or if they were not the correct gap, but not with iridium. So this one has a very fine tip there, first of all, which is iridium coated, and it might not be all iridium, it's just coated. So whatever you do, if you scratch it, you'll damage it. You'll damage the electrode. And you can notice also on the other side, you have a little piece of iridium also welded, or some other metal. I don't know what they're using here. So if you grab with your pliers, but that little piece that is welded in there, let me put some light on it, you're gonna damage it too. It's getting very tricky to re-gap them. Now what you can do is grab this electrode by the part that is not coated and try to bend it. So that's what I'm gonna try to do, and not touch that little piece that's welded to it. And let's see if I can manage to increase the gap. So with a very fine pair of tweezers, I grabbed it there closer to the bend and tried to re-gap it, and it looks like I was successful, because now when I measure it, we are very close to 1.1. I might bend it just slightly more, but we are very close. So that's probably okay, but I'll try to bend it a little bit more. So I checked the final fourth one, and it's okay. So you can see that 2 out of 4 were gapped okay. One had bigger gap and one had smaller gap. That might mean that your ignition in different cylinders will be different, and that's of course not correct. So another point I wanted to make is that you need to change these spark plugs after a while, because if the spark plug doesn't fire correctly, it will strain your ignition system. And even though your engine might run okay, you won't get any engine light, you won't get any misfire, but your ignition system will be strained and some part might fail eventually or fail prematurely. So you want to always change the spark plugs by the recommended mileage on the spark plug. If I go to the box of the spark plug, it doesn't say anywhere how often I should replace them. You have some warranty where they're made, but it tells me that they're iridium. I know that iridium spark plugs are good for about 60 to 80,000 miles or about 100 to 130,000 kilometers. This is the most advanced spark plug that you can get. The other types of spark plugs you can get is platinum, which is about 60,000 miles or 100,000 kilometers. Also, you can get double platinum. That's better and is on par with iridium and is 60 to 80,000 miles, 100 to 130,000 kilometers. Or you can get a regular copper or nickel spark plug, which will look differently. The electrode will be bigger compared to what you've seen on those spark plugs that I've shown you. They are good for about 40,000 miles, 65,000 kilometers. So I know that this car came with the iridium spark plugs, and it says to use only iridium spark plugs on them. This car has about 210,000 kilometers. And iridium spark plugs last around 100 to 130,000 kilometers. So if they were changed already, then it's time to change them again. But if they didn't change them, the previous owner didn't change them, the spark plug change is long overdue. So we're gonna change them, and we're gonna change them with the proper platinum spark plugs. So let's finally go to the spark plug change. Remove the beauty cover. Now you can see where the spark plugs are. Like this, you'll be able to see better. These are the coils on plug, and we'll need to remove them and take out the spark plugs. So first of all, we don't need to disconnect the battery for this procedure because these are powered only when the engine is running. It's safe to disconnect them, mess with them, take the spark plugs out. So now disconnect these connectors. It's not easy. So I will pry them a little bit with the screwdriver, just to get this tab to open up a bit more. And now it went. It's easy once you can pry the tab a little bit. So you actually don't need a lot of force to remove these connectors, but there is a tab here that needs to go up, and it's not easy to just press here to remove them. So now they're all removed. We need to unscrew these bolts and get the coil on plugs out. These are 10mm bolts, so you'll need a 10mm socket. Now we need to remove the coil on plug. Just pry it a little bit and it should come out. Yeah. So if you pull hard enough, it will come out. and it doesn't look very good, to be honest. Here is the coil and some corrosion. If I look inside the coil, I also see some corrosion there. So it's not ideal. I'm gonna try to clean it with the CRC electronic cleaner and see if I can get this rusty part off. And if we go and check how the insides look, it doesn't look too bad. So I'm gonna blow off any dust that has gathered there. So hopefully I blew something out. And now let's take the spark plug off. I'm gonna change only this spark plug and the rest is the same. Now the coil is removed. I tried to clean it a bit. So you can see I removed the corrosion on the rubber part. But if you look inside, you can't see it. But if you look if you would look inside, see that I couldn't clean off that, I don't know what it is, corrosion, whatever. It's still a little bit there, but I hope it won't ruin anything. And we're gonna use some dielectric grease maybe to keep that from deteriorating. So now you need a socket for your spark plug. I believe this is some kind of a magnetic socket, maybe, but it has also some rubber part inside. And when your spark plug goes in, it kind of locks in place, and it will not fall off. So you'll be able to remove the spark plugs from that hole. And then if you pull on it, it disconnects. Let's go ahead and remove the spark plug. It's a bit tricky here with this plastic thing. You have this plastic cover, and it doesn't allow you to use a very long extension. So what you have to do is kind of use two short extensions, measure the distance that you need to go, put this part in, and then connect the next extension and drop it in. So take your bar, and it actually goes very easily. It goes really easy. So I'm gonna use this ratcheting thing to remove it all the way. There's a long thread there. So you go a little bit, and then you can go by hand. I can feel now that the thread jumps. So it means it's unscrewed and it's ready to go out. So now do the reverse. And now you can even do this. And the spark plug is out. And you can see that this spark plug is white. And we're gonna talk about that in a minute. But first, I'm gonna just change the spark plug, and then we're gonna talk about reading the spark plugs. It is also a good idea to compare your spark plugs. That's the one I took out, and that's the new one. And check if the threads are the same length and if your electrode length is the same. Here they're almost the same. I would say this outer light is a bit shorter, but that's okay. Shorter could be okay. If it's longer, if it's much longer, it's not okay because it will hit something inside the cylinder. So this looks okay, and I'm gonna put it in. One question people ask is, should I put anything on the threads? And the answer is, if you have the spark plugs like this that look silver, the threads look silver, they don't need anything on them. They are made to go like this. If you have a yellowish spark plug here, then it needs some lubrication, a copper anti-seize or nickel, I don't know. you'll have to check that out or ask at your shop. But this one, if it's silver, you don't need to do anything. Another thing I've seen people do is just drop the spark plug in. I would say never do that, because we spend some time making sure that the gaps are exactly the same in all of the spark plugs, and you don't want to ruin that by dropping it and banging it and changing the gap. So another thing is that the threads themselves can be damaged if you do that. So never do that. Put that in your socket like this until it locks, and then slowly lower it into the cylinder. So it's not, nice and secure here. We can lower it inside, put another extension in, and then one more extension. And be very careful with these threads, with the threads in general. So try to rotate it counterclockwise, so left, to kind of to loosen it, and see when the threads jump like this. I'm going to do it again, and then you know that you are correctly on the thread, and you can slowly tighten it. So let's do this again. I'm turning, and there was a jump. So I know I'm on the thread, and then I can go slowly tightening it. It's actually a very easy job. I would recommend you changing your spark plugs yourself, then you know what you're putting in. You know if you use the electric grease or not. You know that you didn't put any kind of dust inside when you did it. So you know what you're doing if you're doing it yourself. So I would recommend doing it. It's a very quick job. So now I'm at the end of the thread, and I'm gonna use a torque wrench. For these 1.8 liter engines, you want to go with 18 feet-pound of torque. With 18 feet-pound of torque. Seems a bit tight. You don't want to over tighten them because they are aluminum. There, it clicked. I think it's quite tight. I think it's a bit too tight for my liking. But it did click now, so I'm gonna stop. I might use a bit lower torque next time. So maybe 17, 16, just a little bit less, because it was a bit too tight for my liking. Now the coil part. We're gonna use some dielectric grease to put in there. We'll plug it in, drop it in, tighten the bolt, and connect the connector. So for the dielectric grease, you don't want a lot of it, but I see that I have that corrosion in there, some kind of a gunk. I will put a bit more in. Ideally, the dielectric grease is only for the rubber part, so there is no arcing, and that part where the electrode touches, it doesn't really need to be greased. So I'm just gonna squeeze out a little drop in there, and that's it. Now I'm gonna lower the coil and plug inside. Like this. And it went nice and easy. It went in nice and easy. So now we just need to take our bolt, tighten it back here. Just until it's tight. You don't need to go overboard here because it's a plastic part. Now connect the connector back and you're ready. That's it. You've changed your spark plugs. I'm gonna do all the other spark plugs and then we're gonna start the engine. Please do consider subscribing and liking the video. It means a lot to me, and it's just 2 clicks for you, so doesn't take much time, but for me it makes a huge difference for my channel, so I'll be very thankful if you would consider doing that. Now here are the spark plugs that came out of the car, and I referred to this as a corrosion, but this is not actually a corrosion. I looked it up. This, at least, this stain here, it's called a Corona stain, and this is somewhat normal, but we have also deposits here, and this is caused by oil or whatever's floating around the engine, and it's electrostatically attracted to the spark plug because there's a lot of voltage running through the spark plugs. But we have a lot of it here and here and here. It's not really an issue of the spark plugs themselves there where the thread is or where the plug is, where the electrodes themselves are. This is an issue outside of an engine. This is, in short, this is normal, but we have a lot of deposits here, and that tells me that probably these spark plugs were not changed at all on the vehicle since it was new, because also these are NGK spark plugs. And these most likely came with the vehicle. I'm not sure if I will be able to kind of say what year they are. I think these are the original spark plugs because of the amount of deposits that I see here. So it's good that I changed the spark plugs. I'll talk in more details about these spark plugs in another video. I decided to do another video on how to read spark plugs, so please stay tuned. So I just started the vehicle after the spark plug change, and everything seems to be fine. It started right up. Let's take it for a spin and see if we have any problems or not. Now I'm taking it for a spin, and the vehicle is much smoother. I used to have vibrations when I was stopping at the traffic lights. Now I don't have those, and the vehicle seems to be driving good. No check engine or anything like this. So it's a success. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.